Welcome back to NeuroConversant Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love helping great engineers become great leaders. We have a fantastic guest with us today, Seth Greenwald. He's a fellow mechanical engineer as well as a speaker and a coach, but he's actually still doing the engineering and project management. Seth, welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
So why don't you give us just a minute or two about your background and what it is that you spend your time doing now?
Oh, sure. I would love to. I would love to summarize my life in 1 minute. Right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. So I was born an introverted engineer. I knew this because my parents said, "Hey, Seth, you're an introverted engineer, and you must go to the Cooper Union for the advancement of science and art." We skipped like 17 years between being born and that ride in the station wagon where I said, "Mom, Dad, I don't know what I want to do, but I do know that I like taking things apart." And they said, "Well, why don't you try to be an engineer then?" So I did. I went to a mechanical engineering school at the Cooper Union in Manhattan, New York, and I was a decent engineer. I got through, but I also looked out the window, and there was all these artists. This was the East Village in Manhattan, very bohemian. Back in the 80s when I went there, and I got a little bit of the artist vibe. But I did graduate with in engineering, and I went to school after that at Pratt for industrial design, which was really like industrial art because it was so arty. It was not very technical. So I got both the technical and the aesthetics in me. And now I'm a project manager for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I've been working there for 15 years, and I really do enjoy it, working on mega projects. And I get to put my engineering hat and my artistic hat and my organizational hat on every single day. Of course, I use my communication skills because project manager is all about teamwork, right? And leading a team of people. So that's me in a nutshell.
So that is an interesting combination. I think I have said before that I went to school for mechanical engineering with a minor in psychology, and people looked at me like, who does that? Engineering and art seems like the same type of thing that people would be surprised about.
Yeah, no, I was surprised too that I was so interested in art. In fact, Dave, a roommate in college, he wanted to be an architect, but he didn't have the artistic chops to get in from high school. So what he did was to be a civil engineer for 1 year at Cooper Union, and then transferred over to architecture the second year. So it seems like a lot of people that I know want to do both, right? Want to be technical and they want to be artistic. So it might be unusual in the technical spectrum of engineering, but it helps. It actually, right? It actually helps. There's just one thing. I know we speak about STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and what is it, math? But what about STEAM? STEAM, you've heard of STEAM with the A, it stands for art.
Right.
And I think we're moving from STEM to STEAM with our focus with our going into engineering schools. So I encourage that. I encourage that artistic attitude when you're being an engineer.
Yeah, it's great to have both. And we all have both in us. Just people tend towards one side or the other. But I'm one of 10 kids, and I've got a couple of siblings who grew up very much on the artistic side. And surprisingly, now they have come way over onto the math and science side. So we can all flex. And it's great to be able to encompass both sides of our brain when we're working on things.
One of my favorite topics, Jeremy, both sides of my brain. Should I tell you a little story? I realized I had two sides of my brain. All right, so this is one of my classic stories that started me out on this dualistic brain journey. Because up until I was in sophomore in college, I was all about my left brain, right, being very logical. And I was like, I don't feel whole. I don't feel whole. I need to. And again, it goes back to wanting to be an artist, right? It goes back to wanting to be able to draw. So I saw this book called Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain by Betty Edwards, right? And it was just only a few years old back then. So I read it and I said, hey, you can draw if you can switch your focus from left brain to right brain, the logical brain to the creative brain. I'm like, let me try it. So, I had an ivy plant on my windowsill, and I started drawing the ivy plant. And of course, engineers drawing ivy plants, it looked like a bunch of Doritos, hanging from threads. And then I read the book on what I needed to do to draw. And the magic, Jeremy, was like after I read and after I did the exercises, it looked 1,000 times better than when I started. It looked like an actual ivy plant. It was truly amazing.
And that wasn't through art, like art techniques. It was just through changing the way you thought about it.
Changing the way I see, right? It helped me to actually see what was in front of me. As opposed to thinking I see what's in front of me, it actually helped me to see the reality. So since then, it's been a crazy journey of trying to really get focused on what is in front of me as opposed to overthinking and overanalyzing, analysis paralysis. A lot of engineers go through that. And I do that too, and I still do. But this book really helped me to understand how to switch my mindset, switch my consciousness actually from left brain to right brain. And I do it, now I do it every day. It's a wonderful thing to be able to, at will, go from logic to creativity, and both, pretty much.
It's interesting
So,
because
yeah.
I've often said that I'm not artistic because I don't draw and I have very little ability. Maybe I need to read that book. People say you write both fiction and nonfiction and you drum. You're very artistic. You're just not in the like quote unquote art type of artistic. So what are your thoughts on the different types of artistic that people can be?
Yeah, different. Yeah, exactly. I think of it as more like, everyone thinks being creative, you have to be an artist, right? You have to produce some painting or drawing. But no, creativeness is just about thinking, right? Being open-minded, seeing things that other people don't see who are more logical. And I think it's just, I call myself, and my company is called the Creative Warrior, right? Creative Warrior, meaning I'm always looking for ways to see the world from a different perspective, right? I never stop on my journey of creativity. And it's not really about being artistic, it's about creativity. But having said that, if you consider, writing 3 books artistic, which I've done, then I am an artist. And if you consider being a greeting card illustrator, I don't know if I told you this.
No.
After I graduated from Cooper Union, I wanted to continue my art. So I taught myself basically how to illustrate cartoons, and I taught myself how about the greeting card business. And I set myself up in my apartment on 51st Street in Manhattan, near Hell's Kitchen, actually in Hell's Kitchen. And I was having the time of my life being a creative artist. And I set up a greeting card business called SBG Cards. That's my initials, Seth B. Greenwald. Really creative, right? And I put out, I probably had hundreds and hundreds of cards, but I picked my best 20. And this is in the 90s when everything was print. I had to print, in order to make a profit, I had to print like 10,000 of them. And where am I going to put them? I put them in my mother-in-law's basement. She was my shipping department. And we had a great time, my wife and I, trying to sell these cards. We sold them at the street festivals. We sold them at conferences. And it taught me how to be an entrepreneur. But it all started with being an artist, right? Being creative. So again, going back to your point, it's both, and not just being creative, not just being logical, combining them both and seeing where it takes you.
I love the number of different things that you've done. I love it when people are continually trying to learn and grow and do new things. I think far too many adults are boring because they know what they know and they do what they do and they're just kind of done and they just do that. It seems horrible to me. Tell me what your 3 books are about.
They're about creativity.
Okay, perfect.
The first one's called Secrets of a Creative Warrior. It just gives you, I think it was 64 ways to stay in the creative well, stay open-minded, right? See the world as it is, as opposed to how you think it is or how other people say it is. And then the next book is called Answering the Call of Your Creative Warrior. And that's more of a spiritual book. That's more of finding that creativeness inside of you, right? It has a well of creativity in everyone, and all you need to do is tap into it. So that book goes through how to find that switch. I've always been obsessed with the switch, right? Since drawing on the right side of your brain, switching from the left to the right brain. So I wrote a book about that. And then the last book is called An Engineer's Guide to Public Speaking Excellence. And, my life has been enhanced by being able to speak in public. And I think that's where the project management comes in, because, right, to be a good project manager, you have to be visible, right? You have to be center stage. You have to go from backstage to center stage, right? Engineers are, happy being in the backstage, creating, drawing, analyzing, doing plans and specs in the back room there. But in order to be a project manager, you really get to step out from the back room and be able to be the center of attention, right? For your stakeholders, for your customers, for your team, for your senior leaders. And that's the switch, right? That's the switch I made, being able to go from backstage to center stage. And it's all about being visible, embracing that center stage mentality.
So when you are project manager, you're dealing with all different groups of people, both as in center stage where you need to address everyone maybe, but then also just one-to-one. So you may be talking to the engineer, and then you may be talking to like someone in marketing and sales. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to be able to talk all the different languages, right? I have 50 people on my team, and they all come from a different discipline, right? Civil engineers, structural engineers, marketing, all sorts of planners and lawyers and real estate folks. And so I have to really understand their mindset, right? I have to be able to tap into my mindset to understand what they are all about. So yeah, you got to be very open-minded and not stuck in your technical sort of mindset like a lot of engineers do. And it's not their fault. It's just schools haven't really taught us how to step out into other mindsets. Now, just a little tangent. I'm a big book reader, right? I love reading books, and I came across an author called Edward de Bono. I don't know if you ever heard of Edward de Bono.
Not yet.
Well, he helped me to transform from being a literal, logical, linear thinker to being a lateral thinker, right? And lateral thinkers are people who can see the situation from many different viewpoints. And he has a book called Six Thinking Hats. That's Edward de Bono. And it's, again, magic to me how he created the concept of lateral thinking, which is basically creative thinking, right? It's not just having a problem and being linear about it, going down one path. It's about seeing all different viewpoints before you make a decision, right? You don't know where you're going to end up. So you might as well let a lot of different viewpoints influence your decision, your solution. And that's what a good project manager does. That's what a good engineering manager does. He listens to all of his team because they all come from different perspectives, and you build a solution as you go.
So while we're on this tangent, I often talk to people about getting out of the rut that your brain is in. And one way that people do it is with brainstorming, kind of what you were talking about, where you get different people with different points of view and you can't say no to anything. If someone has a thing, that may not be the right answer, but it may open up a chain of thought that gets someone else to the right answer. But sometimes you don't have a group of people with you. And the recommendation that I always make is make 6 completely different assumptions, or whatever the number is. Like, what if the only thing you were worried about was profit? What would the answer be? What if the only thing you were worried about was the best technical solution? What if the only thing you're worried about was what's going to make the boss happy? And if you make 6 different assumptions, you're going to come to 6 very different answers, and that will help distill what the best of all of them is.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that, Jeremy. Yeah, that's the concept I use called yes and. It's from improvisational comedy, where you cannot say no, right? You have to accept what the other person says to you and build on it, right? It's a very creative, very additive type of way to communicate. Yes and. And that also was something that changed my life, because I was always a very, linear, this is the way it has to be. My dad was a math teacher for 35 years and he was always right. And hey Jeremy, did you know that there is a actual t-shirt out there that says, I'm an engineer, to save time, assume I'm right?
Nice.
I have that upstairs, actually. My dad gave it to me. That's not the way to be, right? That's not the way to be if you want to be a multidisciplinary engineering manager or project manager. You got to let your people speak and you got to listen to them. And yes, and is a way to do it. So
I was just at improv practice last night. So I'm fully on board with you. And when you're saying yes and at improv, it has to be the truth. If the person says your hair's on fire, your hair's on fire. When you're dealing with people in the real world, off the stage, I still agree with the yes and, but the yes is more of accepting that that is their reality. And because so many times people try to push back, if someone says, I believe X, Y, and Z, they will try to push back and say X, Y, and Z is wrong because don't do that. Just accept their reality is X, Y, and Z. Yours may be something different. The and is how can we get to a place where we can both move forward with this?
together, right? Create together, co-create, right? That's something I've learned recently. It's something that's necessary to be a manager, either engineering or project manager. It's a lot about losing your ego, right? In this society, we're taught it's all about me, me, me. I'm the most important. My viewpoint is the best. It's the only one. It's not, right? It's only the ego talking. You have to be able to loosen up, right? You have to be able to let go in order to, I call it me go to we go, right? Or ego to we go, ego to we go. So you have to loosen your ego so that you can go with your team, right? You can see, you can listen, you can understand your team. It's a we thing. It's a creative thing. We're co-creating. But the ego doesn't want to hear that, right? The ego always wants to be, hey, I'm the one. I'm the guy who came up with that. No, you got to just loosen up your ego. So it's a very psychological thing. And I know that you understand that, right? Because you're all about psychology. Yeah.
The two comments I have to say them because I'll forget one otherwise, is I love the saying, you can accomplish anything you want as long as you don't care who gets the credit. I think that is a brilliant one.
Fantastic.
The other, sorry, going back to what you were just talking about, I'm going to go back to when I said most adults are boring. And I think it's because they're not curious. And if you can bring curiosity in, then when someone says something you don't agree with, instead of pushing back, you can say, interesting, why do you think that? And if you can be genuinely curious, a lot of times you can find the kernel of what you agree with in what they're saying. But you have to be curious in order to get there and want to understand it.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing that you can learn from anyone in the world as long as you know how to listen correctly, right? As long as you know how to open up your mind, and as long as you know how to let go of your egotistical thinking, you can learn from anyone. You can learn from anything. You can learn from a rock. You can learn from whatever it is. If you're curious, like you say, if you're creative, if you're open-minded, the world is your oyster, as they say. Yeah.
And now flipping from being good at listening to being good at explaining things, I know that you like to use storytelling in project management. Tell us a little bit more about that and what are some good elements that make a good story?
Yeah, storytelling. I recently discovered a new love, storytelling, because I noticed when I would give briefings to my commander, he would, he would kind of turn off. He wasn't excited. He wasn't focused on what I was saying. And I just came up to him like, Commander, what's the problem? He goes, it's kind of, what you're saying is interesting factually, but it's kind of dry, right? It's kind of boring. It doesn't really cling together. There's no thread. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I thought it was just data. I'm just giving you data. That's what the briefing is. It says no. I need to understand the meaning behind the data. I did a little research. I started to read a few books. I realized it was really about telling a story, but it's not Three Little Pig type of story. Though you can use those types of stories in your briefings if you are clever, and you can use your personal stories to support your idea. But the main thing is to understand your message, right? What is the message? What is the business message that you want to impart to your audience? Who is the audience? So even before you start crafting a story, you got to understand, you got to, what I call in my storytelling course, you got to ramp it up, right? R for reason, you got to understand the reason, A for audience, M for message, and P is what is your point? So you got to ramp it up. And once you understand all those four elements, then you're able to start crafting your story. And in my storytelling course, I call it the SPARC method, SPARC. As you know, I'm an engineer, and all engineers love to use acronyms. SPARC stands for situation, problem, action, resolution, and call to action. And every story has a call to action. Every story has change, right? You have to go from, if it doesn't have change, what's the point of telling a story? It has a goal. These are the steps I did to take to get to my goal. No, you need obstacles, right? A main key, as you observed, as you asked me, is obstacles, right? How did you overcome the obstacles to get to your goal? That's the key to storytelling. So that was last year. I created a storytelling course, and it's called Storytelling for Project Professionals. So check it out. It's really, I like it.
Nice. Yeah. If you're telling a story and you said, "Can I have a glass of water?" and the other person said, "Sure, here it is." That's, not really a story. It's got to be a problem.
It's got to be a problem. Exactly. If you want them to really listen to you and be interested in what you're saying, it's got to be a problem, and it's got to have obstacles to that you've overcome, because that's where the learning is, right? The learning is, what are the obstacles you overcame, and how did you overcome them? So that's where the learning comes from.
Yeah. If you're not making a transformation, then what's the point of being there? If you're not teaching them something or engaging them in a way that makes them behave differently, then you could have saved a lot of time by just being at home, sending an email.
Send an email, just send an email. And that's what I tell my public speaking students. If you're not on stage and you're not telling a story, you're not being interesting, just what's the point of you being there? Just send an email.
Yeah.
Send an email. Yeah.
Which most people prefer to do anyway. So
especially engineers.
Right. So Seth, you've given a lot of resources and things that you offer. How can people find out more about you and learn more about your resources?
Well, you can visit me when I'm speaking at the conference in Louisville on May 13th, or you could go to my website called creativewarriorsecrets.com. One word, creativewarriorsecrets.com. Check out all of my courses and all of my acronyms that I use at on the website.
I like it. All right. We need to start wrapping up. As fun as this has been, I need to keep it to time so that people can finish their commute. So I'll start with the first question is, what is a place you have traveled and loved and a place you have not yet been but want to go?
All right. So a place that I traveled and loved, I don't have a very good memory anymore, but I traveled all over the place. But the last place that I went was last month. I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and my wife and I seem to love the desert. We go to Palm Springs, California, Phoenix, Arizona. We just love the desert. We always thought we were water people, but I think we're actually desert people now. So that's the place I've been recently. I loved it. And where I'm going, where I want to go, where I'm going next week, Morocco.
Oh,
my wife and I
that's
going
exciting.
to Morocco. Yeah, so that's exciting too.
I was in Phoenix fairly recently, and I went for a run out in the desert, and it made me realize how scary being out in the desert can be, because I was sweating the whole time, but when I was done, my shirt was bone dry. I'm like, well, that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So if you go out in the desert, bring a lot more water than you expected
A
to
lot
need.
of water. Yeah, there's something nice about all that oxygen. It seems I always feel more energetic in the desert, because it's dry, so I feel just more alive for whatever reason.
Nice. All right. Who is a person who you think is an excellent speaker, whether famous and we'll know, or just someone in your personal life?
Yeah, someone in my personal life. Actually, I would say my My mom was a really good speaker. She just passed away a few days ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks. But she was a really great speaker. She really understood how to speak because she started her own nursery group. So she understood how to speak to young kids. And she was also a teacher in high school. So she understood that. And she did college. So my mom was a really good communicator. And I appreciate what the wisdom she gave me.
That's a
Being able to,
good role
yeah,
model to have all your life.
yeah, yeah.
And then what is one piece of communication advice we can all benefit from?
I would say from a project management point of view, you want to plan with precision, but you want to dance with uncertainty. And that goes for communication too. There's a lot of, when you speak to people, we really don't understand where they're coming from. So you need to stay open-minded and just, again, tap into your creativity so you can understand them. it, it, you know, just one last thing is the VUCA. You ever VUCA?
Hmm.
It's stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. If you can embrace the VUCA world is VUCA, especially now. If you can embrace that, you have it made as a communicator, because things just don't drop on your lap. You really got to stay open minded and really understand that it's not a linear progression communication. It's more of a lateral open-mindedness. So embrace the VUCA world.
So it's like going back to improv.
Exactly. It's always back to improv. Yeah. Check out my course. The next time we talk, I have a course called Improv to Improve Your
Nice.
Communication Skills.
I like that.
Yeah. I want to give it again. It's a live course that I give every few months.
Perfect. I look forward to that. Seth, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show, Jeremy.
Thank you so much for listening to NeuroConversant Leadership. If you found this beneficial, can you do me one small favor? It'll be quick, I promise. Can you go and give this podcast a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen before doing anything else? Unless you're driving. If you're driving, then I need you to keep driving. And then when you're done and parked, then go ahead and give me a review. Hopefully 5 stars, but whatever you are comfortable honestly giving. Thank you and have a great day.